Thank you. You can keep going. I love it. No. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so as Aaron said, I am the student ministry directors around here. I love students. So I really hope that if you do have a middle schooler, you send them to the gym and let them have fun. And not that you guys are going to not have fun. I'm just going to start teaching, actually. So today, what better thing to talk about than freedom? We didn't line this up to where it's going to be like a cheesy, like, oh man, the youth pastor gets to be cheesy and talk about freedom on the 4th of July. However, it just kind of lined up. It just kind of ended up happening, which is really, in my opinion, what God says we should do is just have cheesy youth pastors that teach on freedom on the 4th of July. So here I am. And as I started formulating this lesson, figuring out what I'm going to talk about, the first thing I could ever think of as being like, I'm free, I get to do what I want, right, is my first car. Right, when I had my first car, not when I got my driver's license, right? So students in here, like when you get your driver's license, that's not freedom, okay? That's mom gets to tell you to go pick up groceries, right? That's more chores for you when you get your license. So I'm not saying postpone it as long as you can, but just so you know, when you get it, that's what it is. But when I got my first car, all of a sudden that opened the world up. I could go wherever I wanted. I could do whatever I wanted. I had this 94, 96 Dodge Dakota Sport, little truck, nice. I say nice, not nice, but it was my baby. So I enjoyed it. I wore that thing into the ground, or tried to at least, until one day when my dad decides, hey, Micah, I need to move your car out. He's just moving it like 20 feet or something. And when he drives it, okay, gives me my keys back, and I overhear him and my mom talking in the other room, and I'm not entirely sure what the conversation was. I did hear the word death trap at some point. Yeah, I mean, I love the vehicle, but it didn't seem like the next week that my dad tried to like problem solve, right? And my dad's a guy, he's very passionate about his kids, and if there's a problem, he won't bat an eyelash to throw a couple bucks at it, right? Meaning, I woke up, it seemed like the very next Saturday, to my dad saying, hey, come test drive this car with me. Come test drive this car. And so I go from this 94, 96 Dodge pickup truck to a 2012, 2013 Ford Focus hatchback with all the bells and whistles. Guys, my phone connected to the radio. That was awesome. I had interior lighting that I could change the colors of. It was amazing. I didn't care about the engine. I didn't care it was a hatchback. I didn't really care about any of that. But all the like cool little bells and whistles, I loved it. Okay? And so it didn't take a whole lot of convincing when at the end of the test drive, my dad said, hey, let's buy you this car. I was like, heck yeah, Dad, let's do it. Let's do it. Absolutely. Except I keep using this word let's. That word does not mean what I thought it meant. And I found that out because all of a sudden I had this car, was driving around for about 30-ish days, and then something happened. That new toy, that new thing that represented my freedom came with a bill. Right? You know, if you don't like pay all of it first and foremost, like up front, if you don't pay all the money, then like they charge you for it, which is dumb. Okay, hate it. But I got the bill. And I looked at it, I was like, what the heck is this? This doesn't feel like freedom anymore. This feels like I'm paying someone else to do what I want. And after like a month or two, I went, hey, Mom, Dad, I can't afford this. I need your help. It was a debt that I couldn't pay. And I think we've all done that. We traded something that was good, right? I traded my truck, okay? Paid in full, no car payment. All I had to do is change the oil every now and again, right? And other stuff. But then I traded that for what looked nicer, but came with a price tag, came with debt. And I don't know what that might be in your life. That might have been a relationship. Maybe a friend, boyfriend, girlfriend that you went, oh, this other person would be awesome. and then they're not. They're absolutely the opposite. That might be a job that you picked up and moved across the country to this job that is offering lots of money and could be like a better position than what you're already in. And then you up and move and you go, there's no wonder this job is vacant. It's terrible. Right? Maybe that's you. Maybe you've done that. Or maybe it's a home. Maybe you moved to a different spot in town. Maybe you moved to an apartment and your air conditioning broke in summer, and so they just changed your compressor like 4 different times, and it still doesn't work. Now, I'm not speaking out of experience. Maybe you did that. Maybe you traded your what was nice for something that was bigger and better, and you thought it was going to be like the best thing that happened to you in a long time. And then your house or home, whatever situation that is bad. Whatever it might be in your life, I think we've all tried to trade up for something and then it not go our way. If you ever play fantasy football with me, I do that all the time. Make a trade, does not work out. But I think we do that in Christianity too. I think we do that in Christianity too. And hear me out on this. I think, we start off and we don't know Jesus, right? We're lost, we're broken, we're chased by sin and shame, and then we find Jesus and make this trade that's worthwhile. Right? We experience this life-changing grace. We trade all of that for freedom from all of that. And we sit in church for a little bit and we kind of pick up on some weird social cues and we go, okay, maybe this freedom means I also have to fill in the blank. Maybe Christianity means there's the gospel, but I also have to add, my church attendance. Right? Or I have to make sure I'm in the Bible, an hour, and if I'm not in the Bible an hour a day, then I don't love Jesus. Or maybe if I don't pray and communicate, maybe I don't. But that's not, those things, don't get me wrong, those things are good. But that's not what our salvation is. That's not where our salvation comes from. Those are things our salvation leads to. But I think in Christianity we've traded freedom for a bunch of rules. And we've traded for this thing that comes with even more debt. But between you and me, that's not the Christianity I believe in. In fact, I don't think that's the Christianity that's worth your time. I think that debt has already been paid. And so we don't have to continue to try to pay for it. And I think that's what Paul's getting at in Galatians 5. We're going to be in Galatians 5. We're going to start in verse 1. Paul's writing this letter to Galatia. Paul is a guy. If you don't know anything about Paul, Paul's a guy hated Jesus. He wasn't the solution. He was the problem. Right? He was a very passionate Jew, and Jesus is getting in his way. And so he persecuted his people. He persecuted Christians that knew Jesus. And if that early on in his life he walked through those double doors back there, he would have beef with all of us. It's not something we want. Pre-Jesus Paul walking through those doors. But then on his way to persecute some more Christians, kill more Christians, he had this encounter. God changed his life. He appeared to Paul, and Paul turned his life around. Now, before I move on, if you're joining us, you don't really know, if you're really about Jesus yet, maybe you're here. That's okay. We love having you. We think, you can be with us before you believe like us. But if you think you're too far gone, Paul later calls himself the chief among sinners. If there's something that's bad, I've done it. That's what he says. And if you think you're too far gone, you're not. Because Paul wasn't too far gone. I know you weren't as bad as Paul. But Jesus can turn Paul's life around. He can change yours also. And so what does Paul do then? He goes on a few different missionary journeys, which just means he goes around Asia Minor and plants churches and tells people about Jesus. By the way, that's what we're about. This residency that Aaron mentioned, we are about planting churches because we believe that the church, the local church, is the hope for our community. And that we're the light to the world around us. Right? So we're going to go and we're going to plant churches in different parts of wherever it is God leads us to. That we can go and we can reach the people around us. And that's what we're about. That's what this residency, this just church planting program is about. And so Paul, in his first missionary journey, he took 3. In his first, he goes to this place in modern-day Turkey called Galatia. And it's just filled with Gentiles, which means non-Jew. That's what Gentile means. Presumably, a lot of them don't know who Jesus is because at that point, the majority of the gospel presentations and gospel messages have gone to Jews. Hey, you believe in the Old Testament. Now here's Jesus. But these Gentiles, they had no background in that, right? And so goes on this missionary journey and spends like a year and a half, 2 years planting this church in Galatia, makes friends, loves the people, and then leaves, goes to the next place. About a year and a half later, he catches word that someone has come in behind him and said, yeah, Paul and what he said, the gospel, cool. But what about these other Jewish things? What about these other traditions that they're not irrelevant? We should still do these things. So the gospel can't be enough. Here's some more stuff. Specifically, he talks about circumcision, okay, which we've talked about pretty often in the last month. I don't know why that is, but it's just this big tradition in Jewish culture. And so we're going to pick up in Galatians chapter 5, starting verse 1. If you have a Bible, chapter 5, it's like Galatians is like if you go in the middle, you'll keep going right. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, then eventually you'll get to Galatians. Otherwise, it's on the screen behind me, or if you're watching online, it's like right here. So, starting in verse 1, for freedom, Christ has set us free. If you don't hear anything else this morning, let that be it. For freedom, Christ has set us free. As in, we have the freedom to go do things, right? We have the freedom. God didn't say, okay, yeah, now I bought you. Now go do all these different things. I require it. That's not what he did. It's for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. Look, Paul, say to you that if you accept circumcision, Christ will be of no advantage to you. That's not saying if you're circumcised or not circumcised. He gets into that later on. But he's saying the ideology of circumcision, if you buy into that, Christ is of no advantage. Let me explain. Jews believed that when a young baby boy gets circumcised, that is a visual representation of his belonging to the people of God. Okay? He's circumcised. He's one of Yahweh's people. Okay? He's a Jew through and through. If that's the case, Paul says, if you believe that that's what does it, that makes you one of God's people, then why Jesus, right? Jesus has no advantage to you. Just keep on believing that, I guess. But there's a caveat here. In verse 3, he says, I testify again that to every man who accepts circumcision, again, the ideology, not the practice, that he is obligated to keep the whole law. In other words, yeah, there's one thing. If you are going to buy into that and make that like the end-all, be-all of your salvation, or what you think is your salvation, then that's one thing. If you're going to keep that one thing, you have to keep all of the other things. And it's not just the 10 Commandments, right? I think a lot of people go, oh, the law, that's the 10 Commandments. Yeah, that's 10 of them, of the 650-ish. I don't think we can go through the 10 Commandments without going, yeah, I've done that one wrong. I've done that one wrong. At least, 2 or 3 there where we go, okay, maybe I'm not perfect because I have done that. But then go through 650 of do this, don't do this, do this, do this, don't do that. Definitely don't do that. If it's a Sabbath, don't do anything, right? It goes through the entire 650 and Paul says, if this one thing from the law is what you think saves you, then you're not omitted from the other 649. you have to do the others too. He says, you are severed then from Christ. You who would be justified by the law, which, let's face it, you can't, because you can't follow all 650 of them. Trust me, it doesn't work. You have fallen away from grace. For through the Spirit, by faith, we ourselves eagerly wait for the hope of righteousness. For in Christ Jesus, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision counts for anything, but only faith working through love. See, he says, it doesn't matter if you're circumcised or uncircumcised. Like, we're not going to, at the end of this service, I'm not going to say, before you head out to the barbecue, there's a moil in room 11. That's not where this is going. It doesn't matter if you're circumcised or uncircumcised. The physical act doesn't matter. But rather, it's the faith that we have that works through love. And then he recounts, right? When he was there, he remembers them. He says, you were running well. Who hindered you from obeying the truth? This persuasion is not from him who calls you, Jesus. That's the him who calls you. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. In other words, one bad apple, that's just the baker's phrase of one bad apple ruins the whole batch, right? A little leaven leavens the whole lump. I have confidence in the Lord that you will take no other view, and the one who is troubling you will bear the penalty, whoever he is. But if I, brothers, still preach circumcision, why am I still being persecuted? In that case, the offense of the cross has been removed. I wish those who unsettle you would emasculate themselves. I love that verse. We'll come back to it. Don't think we're out of the woods yet. Okay. For you are called to freedom, brothers. You're called to freedom. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, watch out that you are not consumed by one another. See, Paul's super concerned for his friends. For this church that he planted, that someone came in and said, hey, that gospel, it's not enough. If someone came and preached that, I would be concerned too. To say the gospel is not your salvation. That's not where your salvation comes from. It's all these other things. That's wrong. And Paul's right to be concerned. He says that these other things, like circumcision, all of these other laws, they're not as important as the gospel. They are not. He calls these people, or this person, whoever it is, he doesn't really know, who unsettles you? Who's this stumbling block? Who's making you trip up on these things? You're not even Jewish. People in Galatia, they're not Jewish. Why are you obligated to fulfill the Jewish traditions? And he says, if that's so, then Christ, he's probably a liar. In Matthew 5:17, he says, do not think, this is Jesus talking, by the way, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Jesus says, I came and I fulfilled the law. All those 650 things, I did and did not do those things that they said I should do and should not do. And then, because I was perfect, I died. That's what Jesus says, so that we can have a relationship with him. And so Jesus fulfilled that. But if you insist on pursuing the law, on these things that you think your salvation is hinged on, if you think that's what it is that saves you, you might as well go the full mile. He says, if circumcision is what saves you, you might as well just cut the whole thing off. I'm not being crass. That's what Paul says. He says, you might as well just go the whole mile. So if your church attendance is what saves you, I know a guy who has a key who can let you in every day. Go the full mile. Be here every day. If reading your Bible is what your salvation hinges on, if that's what your salvation is all about, is just reading this book back to back, like cover to cover, I know I have the number of a lot of seminaries who, if you pay them a lot of money, you can benefit with a degree, right? If these things are what are, if we vote a certain way, good luck with that one, because it doesn't seem like you can. If your Christianity, if your salvation hinges on one of these things that's not the gospel, you better go the full mile, because you're accountable to all 650 of these things in the Old Testament. All of them. So whatever it is, like whatever your standard is, you better meet that and exceed it, Paul says. Or, now hear me out, or it doesn't have to be that hard. It doesn't. It can be a lot easier than filling out all these boxes, fulfilling all these sacraments, doing all these 650 things, obeying all 650 of them. It could be a lot easier than that. It could. Because it's for freedom that Christ has set us free. It's for freedom that Christ has set us free. Not that we would come and say, yeah, I'm a Christian, and now there's an extra price tag. Right? Now there's an extra debt that you owe because you couldn't pay it all up front. Like I said, Jesus paid that debt. And so it's for freedom that Christ has set us free. Now, does that mean we have the freedom to go and indulge ourselves back in sin and in shame and in all these other things? Yeah, we have that freedom. Otherwise, it's not freedom. If we don't have that choice, it's not freedom. So yeah, we can take that freedom. God can forgive us of all these things, and we can go right back to him. Because if it wasn't, that's not freedom. But Paul says in verse 14, or excuse me, in verse 13 and 14, he says, you are called to freedom. Only do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Now, in a few weeks, we're going to talk about, flesh versus spirit and what that looks like. Someone else is going to come teach that lesson. But he's saying, don't use that freedom to do that. You can, but don't. Rather, if we stand up here and we profess everything, like, if he's worthy of everything we could ever be, then there's a different way. What is that, Paul? He says, but through love, serve one another. For all the law, if you want to fulfill all 650 of those things, if you want to fulfill all that in one word, he says, love your neighbor as yourself. He's not the first one to say that, by the way. Jesus said that. The Old Testament says that. By the way, some of you met me today at the door, and you came up and you mentioned Micah 6:8. Micah 6:8, he says, he has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? 650 things. Do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with your God. What is that? Love people. Love people. Mercy, justice, kindness in this version. That's towards other people. Love people. And that's what he says we should do with our freedom. For if it is for freedom that Christ has set us free, let's use our freedom to do just that, to love people. And so I'm gonna wrap up. I'm gonna invite the band back up as I do. But there's this urban legend about Abraham Lincoln, right? What better day? 4th of July. I know he didn't. Anyway. Where Abe goes to this auction, right? A slave auction. And the story goes, he sees this beautiful girl, makes a bid, wins the bid. Now this girl, culturally, is his property, belongs to him, right? Because he paid for her. And she comes up, she goes, okay, master, what do we do? What's next? Where do we go from here? And he goes, wherever you want, I'm setting you free. Now, a little bit confused, she goes, wait, so does that mean I can do whatever I want to do? He goes, yes. I can go wherever I want to go? Yes. I can follow whoever I want to follow? He goes, yes. And she goes, okay, then I'm going to follow you. I'm going to serve you. And now, I don't know if that story is true. with Abe Lincoln, but I know that story is true with Jesus. That he paid for us, and rightfully, he should be able to tell us and direct us to do whatever he wants us to do. But he set us free because he loved us. He didn't want us to have this yoke of sin and shame anymore. He loved us so much, he wanted to set us apart from that. And so then what's the thing that he wants us to do with that freedom? He wants us to just go love people like he loved us. Like we love ourselves. And that's what this is about. It's not about Christianity Plus where you've added on a bunch of different tasks and check all the boxes. It's about loving people. And so my hope is that we would do that you would join me, you would join this church, you would join in with one another to go and love people. Because that's what this is all about. That's what your freedom should be used for, is to love people. So don't get caught up in the minutia of all the tasks, but love one another. Happy Freedom Day. How are you going to use your freedom? Hopefully, you go love someone. God, thank you for what you've done. Thank you that you have given us freedom. That we could go back to the lives you've set us free from. God, right here, right now, I pray that we would just choose to love. Because that's what you're about. That's what you want for your people, is for them to love like you've loved them. To love people that are lost, that are broken, that are not part of your body yet, that they might be. That they could experience the same life-changing grace, the life-changing love and forgiveness that you offer. I pray that that's the direction we go in. Not in a bunch of rules, but in love, working through our faith. I pray this all in your name.